Hello dear students, today we will discuss about the eyeball and the extraocular muscles in relation to the laboratory session. At the end of the session, the student will be able to describe the different coats of the eyeball, name the extraocular muscles of the eyeball and its functions, also identify the visual pathway and its lesions. The lacrimal apparatus here we can see that this belongs to the right side and this specimen belongs to the left side. So the lacrimal gland is having two parts, that is the orbital part, this is O which is written as orbital part, and P which is the palpable part. Okay, O is the orbital part here and this is P which is the palpable part. So from here the tears which are secreted by the lacrimal gland will flow into the lacrimal ducts. Okay, as you can see them here. Okay, they're flowing down to the lacrimal ducts, and then from the lacrimal ducts they enter into the conjunctival sac. And then they will go across the eye, the anterior surface of the cornea, comes to the medial aspect, and then there are two punctums, okay, the superior lacrimal punctum and the inferior lacrimal punctum, and through that it enters into the lacrimal canaliculi. Finally into the lacrimal sac which is present medially. It's a large sac, and then it runs into the nasolacrimal duct, which opens in the inferior meatus, in the lateral wall of the nose. Okay, so that's how the nasolacrimal duct opens in the inferior meatus of the lateral wall of the nose. In this specimen we can see the lacrimal gland, so this will be the orbital part here and this is the palpable part. And then we will also be able to see, as you can see, this one here above and below. So these are the superior lacrimal punctum and the inferior lacrimal punctum. Okay, we may not be able to identify the other structures. So moving on, the eyeball consists of three layers, namely the fibrous layer, which is the outermost layer. Okay, fibrous layer, outer coat. Then you have the vascular layer, which is the middle coat, and then inner layer, which is the inner coat. So the fibrous coat, the outer layer, consists of sclera and cornea. This is the sclera, and the cornea, which is seen here, it is transparent. Okay, so it's transparent. Sclera is white in color, whereas the cornea is transparent. Then the vascular, which is the middle coat, consists of choroid, ciliary body and the iris. Together it's also called as uvea. The inner layer consists of retina, which has both optic part and the non-visual part. Here we can also see that just the cornea is anterior to the colored structure which is called as iris. Okay, so this is iris which belongs to the second layer. Okay, the middle coat. So we can see this from this view here. We can see the sclera, which is the white one, and the transparent one is the cornea, and this is the iris, which gives the color to your eye. It is made up of muscles, the sphincter pupillae and the dilator pupillae. The sphincter pupillae or the constrictor pupillae, it is under the parasympathetic control, and it is supplied by the third cranial nerve, that is the oculomotor nerve. helps in constriction, whereas the dilated pupillae is under the control of the sympathetic. The opening which you see in the iris is called as pupil. This is the dark opening in the center of the iris, which is called as pupil. Okay. So moving on. Next we go to the second layer. See, the view is from above and the sclera is removed, and we can see that this is the choroid. Okay, the second layer, which is choroid. Then we said also the iris. This is iris again from above. The view from above we are seeing. Okay, so this is the iris over here, and we can't see ciliary body from here. Next, once the choroid is removed, we can see other structures. Okay, so this is the lens. This is called as lens. The lens is biconvex structure, which also allows reflection of the light and is responsible for your vision. The changes in the curvature of the lens is responsible for the short-sightedness or the long-sightedness, that is myopia or hypermetropia. Okay. Then we can see here anteriorly this is the cornea. Okay. Then we can see that this is the iris. Okay, that is the iris. And then just behind the iris we can see the lens. Okay, so this structure which you see here is the ciliary body. Okay, ciliary body. There are ciliary processes and it secretes the aqueous humor. It secretes aqueous humor, which is responsible for maintaining the intraocular pressure. Aqueous humor. Okay, so aqueous humor is secreted by the ciliary processes of the ciliary body, and it is into the posterior chamber. The posterior chamber is between the lens and this ciliary body over here. Okay, then that is at this place. This is the posterior chamber. Presence of aqueous humor. Then the fluid will pass through the pupil. This is the pupil. It will enter into the anterior chamber. The anterior chamber is between the iris and the cornea. Between the iris and the cornea. And that is the fluid is again, the aqueous humor is produced by the ciliary body. It enters into the posterior chamber. Then through the pupil, it comes into the anterior chamber. Anterior chamber is between the cornea and the iris. Okay, anterior chamber. And then it leaves, the fluid will leave through the, okay, this place which is called as scleroiridal junction, okay, or canal of Schlemm. Scleroiridal junction, which is also called as canal of Schlemm. This is the circulation of aqueous humor. It's very important to maintain the normal intraocular pressure. Okay, so now behind the lens we can see another chamber. This is called as the vitreous chamber. The vitreous chamber, which contains vitreous humor. Okay, it contains the fluid which is called as vitreous humor. Okay, it's a gel-like substance. Okay, it contains vitreous humor. Okay, the lens is liable to go for degenerative changes, and it is called as cataract. It is a very common surgery which is performed. So here again we can see that the different parts. That is, this is anterior most cornea. Then I said just behind the cornea we have the iris. Okay, so between the cornea and the iris it is called as the anterior chamber, which contains aqueous humor. The opening in the iris is called as pupil. Then between the iris and the lens, okay, it is called as posterior chamber, which contains also the aqueous humor. This is the ciliary body over here. The lens is kept in position by the suspensory ligament of lens, okay, also can be called a zonule. So the production of aqueous humor from the ciliary body, it presents in the posterior chamber, then through the pupil it comes out and goes to the anterior chamber, and then it leaves through the canal of Schlemm, okay, into the trabecular veins, okay. The conjunctiva is a mucous membrane covering over the cornea, the parts of sclera, and it can be seen as the upper conjunctiva and the lower conjunctiva, okay. Just behind the lens, we said that there is the vitreous, okay, so this is the vitreous body, and we can also notice the three layers here. This is the sclera, the outermost, deep to that is the choroid, which is the vascular one, and then the third layer, which is the retina. Okay, so what is the fundus? The fundus is the posterior part of the eyeball. The posterior part of the eyeball is called as fundus. What is optic disc? It is where the sensory nerves or the sensory fibers and the nerves will enter the eyeball, and there are no photoreceptors over here, so it's called as the blind spot, okay. So this is the optic disc over here, optic disc. As you can see, the optic nerve, okay, optic nerve fibers which are leaving, which is an afferent nerve, which is leaving from here, and you can see blood vessels, central retinal artery and vein inside it. So this is the place where it is seen in the posterior part of the eyeball. It is called as optic disc, optic disc. Then what is macula lutea? It is a yellow spot, okay, you can see here, this is the macula lutea. It is a yellow spot which has a special photoreceptor, that is the cones, and it's usually not seen with an ophthalmoscope. And Fovea Centralis, it is the center of the macular area and it is responsible for acute vision. So you have the fundus, the posterior part, then you have optic disc, which is also called as the blind spot, then the macula lutea, which is called as the yellow spot, and Fovea Centralis, which is in the center of macula. Now we can see the third layer, which was the retinal layer, okay, the nervous layer. So these are the retinal vessels which are seen, and again you can see this is the optic nerve, and along with the optic nerve we can also see the central retinal artery and vein. Optic nerve is the second cranial nerve, and this view of the retinal vessels can be seen by an ophthalmoscope, okay. It is called as this is a normal ophthalmoscopy, okay, in which we can see the optic disc, okay, the optic disc. This is the optic disc. The optic disc is the region where you see the optic fibers or the central retinal vessels entering, okay. So that is this is the optic disc over here, okay, and we said that it is the blind spot. Then from there we can see all these vessels which are radiating out, that is the central retinal vessels, and this is the macula, which is the yellow spot, and the center of the macula is called as Fovea Centralis, okay. This is actually a picture of the retinal detachment, okay. So you can see how the retina, if it is going to be detached, this is how it looks like, and all this can be wonderfully observed by doing ophthalmoscopy. So ophthalmoscopy is the fundoscopy to view the fundus, that is the posterior part of the eyeball. The retinal arteries and the veins will radiate over the fundus from the optic disc. The pale oval disc appears with the retinal vessels radiating from it. Pulsation is also visible. The macula is the place which is darker with the reddish hue. Clinically, we can also see sometimes retinal detachment due to a blow to the eye. And papilledema is the edema of the retina due to increased intracranial pressure. Papilla edema. So again, you can have a view of the all the three layers of the eyeball. So outer layer is called as the outer layer is the fibrous layer, which consists of sclera and the cornea, which is transparent and present anteriorly. Then you have the second layer, which is choroid. The second layer, choroid. Okay, and then we have, along with choroid, we have the ciliary body and the ciliary muscle. Okay, forming the second layer, and the third part of the second layer will be the iris. Okay, which contains the two muscles, dilator pupillae and constrictor pupillae. So they are under the autonomic nervous system. Okay, then you can also see the third layer, which is consisting of retina, third layer, which is the nervous layer. Okay, and the other structures are the vitreous in the just behind the lens kept in position by the suspensory ligament of the lens, also called as zonule, and you can also see the optic nerve with its meninges over here, whereas central retinal vessels in the center, and Fovea Centralis, which is in the center of macula. Now coming to extraocular muscles, so there are totally 4 rectus muscles. They are called as superior rectus. Then you have inferior rectus. This is the medial rectus, and this is the lateral rectus. This eye belongs to the right side. Okay, and this is the lateral view which you're seeing. Then we have 2 oblique muscles, namely the superior oblique. Okay, so in short we can write it as SO. Okay, and we have inferior oblique. Okay, okay, and there is also another muscle which is also called as the levator palpebrae superioris. Okay, which is not shown in this diagram. Okay, so moving on, we can see all this in this specimen. Okay, this will be the superior rectus here. Okay, and to more to, this is not very clear, but this is the superior oblique here. Okay, superior oblique. Then we have okay, this is superior rectus here, right? Okay, and this is the lateral rectus. This is the cut end of the optic nerve itself. Okay, and on this side we can see the medial rectus over here. Okay, and then let's move on. So this is a photograph related to the left side. This is the left eye. Okay, you can see lateral rectus, so with this you can make out as the left eye, and this is the medial rectus here, the superior rectus, the inferior rectus right down. Then you have the oblique muscles. Okay, this is the superior oblique here, and this is the inferior oblique. All these muscles, that is levator palpebrae superioris, okay, then superior rectus, medial rectus, inferior rectus, and inferior oblique, all are supplied by the oculomotor nerve, third nerve. The superior oblique is supplied by the trochlear nerve. Okay, so it's, you can remember the mnemonic SO4. And the lateral rectus is supplied by the 6th nerve, so we can remember it as LR6. Okay, and this can be called as O3. Okay, that is oculomotor supplying all the other all the other muscles. Okay, this mnemonic is very easy to remember the muscles and the nerve supply. Now coming to the actions, the superior rectus will help in movement above. Okay, so that is up movement along with inferior oblique. Okay, so it is superior rectus plus the inferior oblique, which is going to help you in upward movement. Okay, and superior rectus will also allow up and in movement, up and in movement. The medial rectus will help in inwards movement. Okay, this diagram is given related to the right eye. Okay, and the lateral rectus will help in outward movement, okay, or abduction. The inferior oblique will help in up and out, okay, up and out, like this, up and out. Whereas inferior rectus with superior oblique will go for down movement. Inferior rectus alone goes for down and inward movement. Okay, and superior oblique goes for down and outward movement. Okay, so for example, if the lateral rectus, which is supplied by the abducens nerve, which helps in abduction, if it is going to be cut, if it is going to be affected, it will cause loss of abduction. So the eye will go for medial squint, okay, or convergent squint. Okay, now coming to the visual pathway. So here we can see that this which is shown is the nasal field. Okay, these are the nasal fields, and this is the temporal field for each eye. Okay, so let us first identify. This is the this is the left eye, okay, and this is the right eye on this side. Okay, so we can see that this is the nasal field, and laterally it is called as the temporal field. Now there are two types of fibers. Okay, we have nasal fibers and we have temporal fibers. The nasal fibers will carry the temporal field of vision, whereas the temporal fibers, okay, will carry the nasal field of vision. As you can see here, like you can see this X over here, that means that it's carrying the opposite field of vision. Okay, so I'll repeat again. It is the nasal fibers will carry the temporal field of vision, and the temporal fibers will carry the nasal field of vision. Okay, after that it's called as the optic nerve, and then you can see that the optic nerve leaves the optic canal, okay, and then or through the optic foramen, and then there is this X formation over here, which is called as optic chiasma. Here what happens is the nasal fibers will cross. Only the nasal fibers will cross, okay, whereas the temporal fibers do not cross. Temporal fibers do not cross, okay, and then it goes along to form the optic radiation. Okay, it's the optic tract. Okay, and then once it meets the lateral geniculate body, then it's called as the optic radiation. Okay, and which goes to the occipital cortex. Okay, so now let us see what will happen at different places when you have lesions. Okay, so if the lesion is here at A, level A, that means the left optic nerve is injured. It will be blindness of the left eye. Blindness of the left eye. If the lesion is at the optic chiasma, so the nasal fibers from both the sides are affected, or they are cut, whereas temporal fibers are not crossing, so they are not affected. It will cause bitemporal hemianopia. Okay, bitemporal hemianopia. Here you can see that the left side, the blue, dark blue shows that it is the left side, left eye vision is lost. Here you can see that it is bitemporal hemianopia. So the temporal side vision is lost. Okay, nasal fibers are cut, so the temporal side vision is lost. It's called as bitemporal hemianopia. Okay, now the lesion is at C. Okay, so when the lesion is at C, here it is left optic tract which is cut. Left optic tract which is cut. So please understand first what are the fibers which are passing through. You have the temporal fibers of the left side, okay, and you have the nasal fibers of the right side which is passing through. Now think about what it's carrying. The temporal fibers of the left are carrying the nasal field of vision of the left. Okay, so that will be lost. So look here, the left side nasal field is lost, and the nasal fibers of the right side, okay, nasal fibers of the right side were carrying the temporal field of vision of the right side. So that will be lost, and that's why it's called right homonymous hemianopia. Right homonymous hemianopia. Okay, so you can understand that left-sided nasal field of vision is lost, and right-sided temporal field of vision is lost. Okay, the name is right homonymous hemianopia. Okay, now after the lateral geniculate body, okay, then you have the D. At the D, this is called as optic radiation. Here when there is a lesion, it is actually affecting the left geniculocalcarine tract of the visual cortex, and here it's similar to C. It is similar to C. So again we have the loss of the nasal field of vision of the left and the temporal field of vision of the right. But okay, it's called as right homonymous hemianopia with sparing of the macular vision, as you can see here, there is a small sparing of this central part of the vision. Okay, so that's called as macular sparing over here. Okay, so there is macular sparing at this particular part. So this is how we need to identify the parts of the visual pathway, and when there is a lesion at different levels, and what happens, what are the defects which occur. Okay, thank you.